I'd like to introduce our next fireside chat with a leader of one of the world's most innovative energy companies, Enel Group, headquartered in Italy with operations in over 30 countries. They are a power company changing the face of energy. Antonello Cammisecra is the head of Global Infrastructure and Networks Division for Enel. Prior to that, he was sole director of Enel Green Power and director of the Africa, Asia, and Oceania region. He was also director of the North and Central America region and held various other positions within the company over his 2 decades plus tenure. Matt Heimer, senior features editor, oversees Fortune's long-form storytelling and manages their op-ed and commentary desk. Matt is a co-chair of the CEO Initiative Conference and is the lead editor for Fortune's annual Change the World list. For this segment, we'll have time for audience Q&A, so please use the Q&A function if you have a question. Matt, I'm handing it over to you.
Laura, thank you so very much. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm also just honored to be sharing an event with the SVI Group. You've been such great partners with us on the Change the World list over 7 years now, so thank you so much for that. And Antonello, thank you for making time to talk with me.
Pleasure.
So, yeah, I'm glad you're here. So more than 1 billion people around the world essentially have no access to electricity whatsoever, and hundreds of millions more lack reliable electricity, lack affordable electricity. To be shut out from electricity essentially means to be shut out from the modern economy. Without reliable electricity, people can't access the tools that power commerce, finance, employment, education, healthcare. So obviously this is an essential good. And of course, COVID-19 and the pandemic circumstances have highlighted the gap between those who have it and those who lack it. At the same time that we want to reach these people with electrification, we also have the imperative of decarbonization, right? The climate crisis is highlighting the need to transition to low carbon economy so that basically the future of the planet is secured. So we have these two contrasting, difficult to balance goals, essentially, between electrification for those who need it and decarbonization for the planet. Enel, of course, is a leader in this space and aims to be a company that truly drives this transition. And Antonello, you've committed to progressing towards a sustainable energy system in line with the UN's SDG 13 climate action goals. And that means, again, harmonizing these two ambitious goals of decarbonization and electrification. So how are you and Enel tackling both simultaneously?
Oh, thank you. This is a very broad and comprehensive question, which I think as an answer will require, let's say, quick, easy description on what we mean for energy transition and what are the true meanings of decarbonization and electrification. Because the short answer is there is no contrast between these two phenomena. Actually, the first is the reason why we may hope that the second will act faster, easier, and in harmony with goals of sustainability. In the past decade, so the numbers, the figures that you have reminded to all of us are astonishing, and I think represent a problem of the same magnitude of the climate change itself. Because having 1 billion of people or more, 2 billion with a frugal access to electricity, to energy, is a problem that has the same, let's say, ethical magnitude of the problem of maintaining the globe in equilibrium, under my personal opinion. Because you said it's an essential good. I would be more bold on that. Today, in modern terms, access to electricity as a form of energy must be considered as human right. So it's more than that. Okay, if we stand from this point of view, then we will understand that decarbonization and electrification are exactly two sides, two complementary and avoidable sides of the energy transition. The past decade has been very intense technological, economical journey that who, like myself, were working in the electricity space promoting renewables from the technological side, meaning making renewables more reliable, more performing, more safe, more predictable somewhat, and implementable at scale. And on the other side, striving in order to make them economically viable through the push of competition. We can say with satisfaction that that decade could be considered over, in the meaning that we won. Today, the easiest way everywhere around the world to generate decarbonized energy, specifically electricity, is by using renewables, and specifically two technology, wind and solar, which have the beauty of being quite democratic, in the sense that they are well spread around pretty much everywhere, with a very low access barriers, meaning that the technological cost to implement projects of that nature is affordable from many countries, from many energy systems all around the world, including the ones that are desiring to allow access to electricity for a larger number of citizens, prospect consumers. Okay, so today we have a weapon in this battle. We have a solution to this need that became competitive, easy, scalable, reliable, and which journey from this point of view has not ended yet. I mean, the best possibly is yet to come. So renewable will become farther cheaper, farther performing, so that easier to handle, so that there will be the solution pretty much everywhere. As also the big data provider like IEA or other, let's say, scenario makers are indicating. So the 90% of the capacity addition of the next 2 decades will be basically wind and solar. So if we found a way to decarbonize, then we can dream to have electrification in the 2 meanings we're using this word today. One is the first access to electricity, and the second, that is of the same importance, that is gaining to electricity the supply of other energy needs. I mean, supplying with decarbonized electricity energy needs that so far has been satisfied by fossil fuels, by fossil energy sources, so that we can tackle these 2 things at the same time, because we have a solution. We have the decarbonized electricity, the renewable electricity that is becoming easier and cheaper everywhere. And it's under those principles that we in Enel have, acting in the past, pushing a lot on the decarbonization side, becoming one of the leaders of the renewable energy with Enel Green Power. And now we are dedicating the next decade to the electrification, because we definitely believe that the visible effort, collective visible effort in the next decade, this decade, the decade we're living, so the 2020, 2030 will be solving or accelerating the solution of the first access to electricity, thanks to the fact that we have renewables finally, and gaining space for electric energy, electricity in other uses. And if we can do that with the same level of success that we have obtained in the past decade for renewables, I think we have a hope to go in the direction of, let's say, the Paris Agreement, the sustainability, living a hope of prosperity without compromising on sustainability.
That's very optimistic and in the best sense, and very encouraging. What are some of the markets? I mean, I know Enel has a global footprint all over the world. What are some of the markets or some of the regions in which you're you're putting this into practice? I mean, areas where customers are getting electricity for the first time, but from the base of a grid that is sustainable from scratch.
Let's say the waves of electrifications in the meaning of, let's say, moving, let's say, through the final consumer decision, using electricity for more energy uses, for new energy uses, will, in the next 10 years, will happen pretty much everywhere, but with waves. What I mean by that, that we will, of course, experience it first in the more, let's say, advanced, economically advanced countries for logical reasons, because the spending power of those consumers will be, let's say, more aligned with the capability to buy, for example, an electric vehicle or to install a heat pumps. So that, and from this point of view, we're seeing signals in our distribution, let's say in our markets already in Italy, in Spain, for example, where the request for connection of distributed generation solutions from one side and of, for example, charging points, e-vehicle charging points on the other side are, let's say, increasing, are soaring in a really visible way. So double-digit increment year over year. So we are seeing that the taking over of the electrification is happening probably even faster than what we thought just a few years ago. From this point of view, having a dynamic that is quite similar to the renewable journey that we experienced 10 years ago. You know that the characteristic of the past decade was that year after year, let's say the scenario were always too conservative with respect to the number of new projects or new megawatts installed, and it was a constant of the past 10 years. And I personally believe that we are underestimating the speed with which in many evolved, advanced, the economically advanced countries, the consumers will participate into this, let's say, let's call it fuel switch, okay, in this decarbonization journey through the electrification of their own final consumptions. Of course, we also believe that in few years, with a very few years time span difference, large metropolitan areas, for example, the megalopolis of South America will follow quite quickly. So we imagine that we will see electric vehicles or, let's say, heat pumps in Sao Paulo, just to make an example, just with a very few years of time span difference with, for example, Europe. So we will see waves, but in general, pretty much everywhere, the solutions are available today. They're becoming very cost effective, technically viable, so that consumers can really move quickly into this direction. And by doing it, they will not only decarbonize their own consumption, but they will build an energy awareness that will be very important in order to drive their, let's say, their choices when they buy other goods for which they don't consume directly, but they consume indirectly energy. And the energy awareness they have built in their direct choices will be absolutely one element of selection for their purchases when they select something they're going to buy. So for example, if I have to buy biscuits today, I can decide to buy brand A and not brand B, because brand A is advertising me that they are manufacturing the biscuits only using renewable sources. For just as a funny example.
Sure.
Okay. At the same time, we are observing that more and more developing countries are finally understanding that if they promote sustainable long-term program for renewable electricity as the main component of their energy matrix in the next years, they are not only, let's say, contributing to the sustainability of their energy matrix, but they're also offering an opportunity at several levels, home, small system, mini grids, microgrids, grid connected project, really to implement electrification projects in the meaning of first access to electricity. So that we are seeing that there are few, let's say, pioneering countries, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, that are now differentiating themselves in the ambition of solving, trying to tackle the problem with the help of the technology that renewables do represent today. Then finally, let's not forget that a very important part of the problem of electricity gap, of the energy gap, is not in remote far area, but it's just in the peri-urban, let's say, neighborhood of large metropolitan cities. So there is a very fine line between, let's say, the availability of energy and a life without electricity. And that's at the same time is a a big shame from a certain point of view, but also make it easier from a certain point of view to try to do something material and real to solve the issue. So maybe I am a little bit too optimistic. That's my personal nature. But me, I have more than 20 years of experience in this industry, and many of them I have spent also in projects, for example, in Sub-Saharan Africa. And I can tell you that it is evident that now we are finally understanding what is really needed in order to be material and let's say fast in the implementation of a project that can try to solve the problem that you described perfectly at the beginning.
Sure. Well, it sounds as though I know often in the context of shared value, we talk about getting product, process, and people correct, and also making sure that all of those factors are inclusive. And with technological developments in clean energy, you've reached a point where the cost barriers to the product, it seems, are no longer a major obstacle when it comes to electrification. You've just been describing a process that makes accessibility and choice part of the presentation of these energy sources to consumers. So that's obviously a positive. Let's talk briefly about the people side of things. Is the project of electrification and a green transition one that we see generating, for example, job opportunities and economic growth beyond just kind of the top elite of engineers and specialists? You know, is that part of the value proposition for a developing economy? Is the chance to create income for people in building this infrastructure?
Absolutely, yes. And first of all, let's be more precise. The decarbonization, so implementation of renewable project and electrification, and of course, now I'm using this term in the meaning of the important level of investments that are required in the reinforcement of the distribution infrastructure in order to connect the emerging consumptions from one side to the, let's say, the offering of renewable electricity on the other side, are two industrial applications, two industrial sectors that are capable to multiply the job creation per, let's say, $1 million invested. So both renewables and grid technologies typically can offer let's say, an impact of job creation that is very positive and typically higher of the ones of the conventional technologies, energy technologies. Most importantly, for the grid expansion, so for the investments in distribution grids, what is very important is that the investments are local. So a very important portion of the investments are physical builds, physical activities that are, of course, realized on the territory that is hosting the grid. So involving crews, technicians, workers, blue collars. So all the scale of capabilities for very, let's say, basic working skills to all the chain, all across the chain, up to skilled engineers, digital engineers, and so far and so on. So there is a spillover, a visible, calculable spillover effect, both on the renewable industry and in the grid infrastructure industry, that are absolutely positive and involving local enterprises, which in turn, of course, will hire local people for permanent jobs, which is very important. So it's not only during the construction phase, but typically the number of jobs that are created for the maintenance and management of those two typology of infrastructure, renewables and the grid, are more in the long term than during the construction phase. So we have the numbers that can prove it, coming from our own experience, but also benchmarking it with the general figures that are available in the market. So definitely, yes, there is a very positive spillover effect, not to count what you create as a positive effect for the fact that you are, let's say, investing in the local economy, so needing services and goods around you because you are building an infrastructure that is there for the rest, I mean, next 50 years.
Yeah. all of us thinking forward, all of these waves of progress, of course, have to be fueled by a great degree of innovation. What do you do internally within the company and in the leadership to kind of foster a culture of innovation, of experimentation, of exploring the products that are going to be required to build out this 50-year project?
Well, first of all, in our view, innovation and sustainability must go hand to hand together, because there is a new challenge for the innovation effort that is not only to innovate, let's say, evolve technology, but also bring ahead, so the fastest you can, a new technology that can be let's say, in tune with the ambition of going net zero, reducing the carbon footprint, using more recycled materials, and reduce the carbon footprint of the infrastructure per se. So we have embraced an open innovation approach since a number of years already, which means that we are, let's say, asking questions which answers not necessarily come from the inside, but we open our questions to a more collaborative approach, so that from any possible source all around the globe, through our networks of collaborations, we can receive the best answer, because we cannot know everything by ourselves. So we've been quite humble from this point of view. We have to say, though, that we are one of the largest grid operator, one of the largest renewable company in the world. So we have also built over time a quite unique technical knowledge. So, for example, in the field of grid digitalization, we became an absolute market leader. So some of the innovations are, let's say, invented in our lab and are intellectual property that we do own and that we sell to our other grid operators that want to live the similar digitalization journey to us. But in general, other than this specific field, we are working in a very collaborative, open way in order to get the maximum from the network of, let's say, labs, innovation hubs, relationship with universities, and technological companies that we built all around the globe.
Thanks, Antonello. This is all really enlightening and inspiring to hear. Several of our viewers have submitted questions through our Q&A function, and some of them are pretty interesting. So in the time left to us, I'd love to foreground a couple of them. One guest asked about the intermittent aspect of solar and wind. In practice, how much of a challenge is the storage problem, essentially, to these non-renewable energy sources? What is Enel doing to try to combat that, especially with regard to storage and battery technology?
Yeah, well, first of all, in most of the country where we do operate with our grids and with our power plants, we have a quite important number of hydropower plants, which are, in my opinion, will be the natural batteries of the future. So we will use more and more hydropower as a natural batteries from one side. On the second level of answer is that the evolution of batteries, most of the evolution of the battery has yet to be seen so far. So we have in front of us a very important technological evolution of this technology, not necessarily in the lithium-ion batteries, electrochemical battery solution. So there are many fields of investigation, of innovation that will bring safer, cheaper, bigger storage capabilities. Again, not necessarily only electrochemical ones. So gravity, compressed air. So there are many liquid air or flux batteries, solid state. So there are many technologies that are in the lab today that are exiting from the lab quite quickly that will represent an opportunity.
Yes.
So hydro, batteries, the combination of wind and solar, so much wind and much solar together, flexibility, the keywords of the next 10 years will be flexibility, flexible generation, and flexible consumptions will help the grid operators to manage the power flows from both sides. Then there will be a little role, in my opinion, somebody thinks they will be bigger, but of the hydrogen and very little gas in the transition period. And then we will be, so we dream, we plan, because we believe it's doable, that one day we will be completely decarbonized and we will have only renewables in the grids. Just, if you are skeptic about it, just measure how many days in Europe there are countries or important part of energy markets that are going per days after days purely with renewables. It's doable.
What role does, and here again, I'm channeling a question from our audience, what role does nuclear energy play in the future that you're aspiring to?
The real honest answer is that I don't know, because it's a very complex question. Today, it looks like there are not so, let's say, positive perspectives. The main reason I think are twofold. The one is we lack standardization, to have a safe, intrinsically safe, advanced nuclear technology, we would need a level of a global standardization that is not happening today. So it's not happening. And if it starts to happen now, you need 20, 30 years to come up with a new technology. The second is that most of the electricity sector is now in the hands of private company. And the risks of a development of a nuclear project, it's just unbearable from a private company. So that's, I think, is a hurdle that we have to. Now, if the evolutions of batteries and renewables will continue with the speed that we have experienced in the last years, maybe we don't need nuclear for the future. But again, it's a very difficult prediction to be done.
Sure, absolutely. Antonello, we've come pretty close to the end of our time, and I want to thank you again so much for making the time to talk with our audience and to talk with me. I'm very grateful for it. We have about 30 seconds left. Would you like to leave the audience with any last words?
Yes, I think the last words are for the consumers. And by consumers, I mean all of us. The energy transition will happen if we take our part as consumers, as citizens, as energy consumers. We understand that we have an immense power in our hands, and we have to consume less and consume better. So we have to consume only sustainable power directly in our homes and being energy aware and try to buy only goods that are manufactured in a sustainable way. If we start collectively to do that, then yes, we have a hope to be on time by 2030.
Thank you, Antonello, and thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Take care.